Hello, and welcome to another edition of Close Mode, the enterprise sales show. I'm Brian Dietmeyer, CEO of Close Strong. And today I'm legit excited to be here with Andrew Sykes. Andrew is Habits at Work CEO, has been a TEDx speaker. And also what I find cool is he teaches entrepreneurship at my alma mater, Kellogg. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Thrilled to be here on a apparently spring morning, but Chicago hasn't really woken up yet to that.
Well, we just I can't swear like I did in our pre-call, but we were just talking about the very tough flowers that come up and grow out of the snow in Chicago. We had different names for them, but I love them.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, you have this quest that's really cool and lofty, and it's to make sales the most trustworthy profession on the planet. And as I thought about that, I guess we all know buyers, have maybe PTSD that goes back generations from bad selling. It made me think about that, right, when I read your kind of little one-line manifesto there. And I feel like now there's a lot of sellers maybe paying the price for bad past behavior as well. But anyway, so yeah, let's talk about this. And I'm going to sneak in a question. Most people know I give you the questions in advance, but I'm going to sneak in one. What led you to this? Why this passion for this issue?
Yeah. Well, what led me to this is I am myself a salesperson. I teach sales, leadership and sales management and sales skills. And I'm passionate about this area of trust.
Yeah.
And at least from my perspective, to sell means to help another human being make progress in their lives.
Okay.
Whether that's in their career or their personal lives. And I think that is a noble pursuit. So if sales can be such a beautiful thing to help someone really make progress, then surely that's something to be celebrated. And dare I say, it's even a noble profession. And then when you look at how people relate to salespeople, it's no secret that on every survey, salespeople are judged to be the least trustworthy. Right. So there's this gap between my archetype of the noble, other-focused, generous, helpful salesperson and the reputation. And so either I'm just plain crazy or I've chosen one of the big problems in life, which is to close the gap between the reputation of the worst salespeople and the profound value-added approach to life that the best salespeople bring, and I want to close that gap.
Man, I'm sorry. I'm actually still stuck on. I've been doing this for a bit. I've been a salesperson, a sales leader at a Fortune 50, a sales consultant, and you defined sales as helping. I'm paraphrasing, maybe another human being make progress in their life. Like that, sorry, I'm still, like I said, that was still kind of spinning around in my head because you can, I'm even thinking of the business side of that. And I've often said that to people. It's like, we're all going to business. It's all really hard. We all got to do it. And we all have things we have to get done at work, but ultimately those are to make progress in our life. And I like how you kind of even skipped over the business piece and just said, hey, it's to make progress in their life. But I feel like that's in there, right? That's embedded in your definition.
Yeah, if making progress is advancing your career or solving a business problem, that's in there. And you'll notice that there's no comma at the end of that sentence, as there often is in the definition, which is comma using our products and services. I don't include that because in my view, the best salesperson would say, Brian, what's your problem? Given your problem, you know what? I think this solution over here is the best for you. And it doesn't come from my company. It comes from an internal resource or even a competitor. So yes, are you charged to sell a product as a salesperson by your company? Absolutely. But I think the profession of sales is defined as helping other people make progress, whether or not that includes your product.
Yeah. And this is so fun already talking to you. This is another thing that I've heard a couple of times recently is this notion of regardless of me. And I often say, it helps someone source a category, not necessarily buy your stuff, but you even brought in, maybe it's not even a category. Maybe it's best to do it yourself. And I feel like I have heard that a couple of times recently, that we're beginning to realize that is our role. Of helping you get that decision made, helping you make the right decision. And on a podcast with Alice Hyman, I think yesterday, we talked about, even up front of helping you make the right decision, helping you identify what is the problem you're solving for, because there's a lot of people out there that are solving the wrong problem, and then if you have the wrong problem you're going after, you're not going to find the right solution no matter how many you look at. So I
Yeah.
love that notion of even getting away from selling your thing.
Yeah, and Brian, worth pointing out, a lot of sales training focuses on find the problem, find the pain, and fix that.
Right.
But I'm not sure that it's always problem or a pain point in the mind or the language of a customer.
Yeah.
That's why I prefer this making progress, because I want to make progress in a bunch of areas. I don't consider them to be problems. For example, I want to learn to sing better, and I need some help in that area. But I don't consider it a problem that my singing voice is terrible.
Yeah.
Other
people might, right? Exactly. I had to call you out on that one. There could be humans somewhere. Yeah, it's funny because years ago in my other company, and I think the author is Piero Ferrucci, I think, but he wrote a book called The Power of Kindness. And it's funny, you know how you have meeting themes. That was our meeting theme, and I gave that book to everyone. And I said during the meeting that, like, if we cared more than everyone else, that's the most kick a business strategy that there is. Like, if you literally care more than everybody else, that's a ruthless business strategy. And that's kind of it's kind of where you're going. Yeah, I think we should adopt this definition of sales. I really like it a lot because it changes your worldview on everything. If that's the lens that we're viewing things through. I also wonder, I'm thinking back, in my previous life, I was a negotiation consultant. And one of my clients up in Silicon Valley had been holding a weapon to one of the biggest chip manufacturers' heads in the world for years, because they always had the coolest new software and new tools to help reduce defects, blah, blah, blah. And now the competitors were catching up. And I remember saying to my client, I refer to them as legacy practices, right? This notion that you've basically been beating this manufacturer over the head for 10 years. And so said it's going to take a bit to undo that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's you're not just going to go in and go, hey, trust us, we're different. You're going to prove that out over time. And I just wonder your take on that, on like building trust. If you're starting from a neutral place, or maybe if you're starting from a place where trust has been broken, how long does it take? How do you do that?
One of my favorite questions. And let's start with the beginning part of trust. When you first meet someone, I don't think we start from neutral.
Okay.
I often have students in my class and people that I teach sales skills to do an assessment of how much they trust other people by category. And we look at strangers, and they mostly get a sort of 4 out of 10. And then coworkers, a 6 out of 10. And friends and family, an 8 or a 9 out of 10. And then I ask people, like, how much do you think you can be trusted? And the response is usually, 9, 10. But I'm like, but hang on a second. You just said you don't trust strangers more than a 4 or a 5. You are a stranger to other people. And in fact, you're worse than that when you're a salesperson, because salespeople are often awarded not just low trust, sometimes negative trust.
Right.
So I don't think we start as a neutral. In fact, I think the common myth that trust takes time to build is explained by this phenomenon I call a trust hole.
Okay.
Which is a negative trust deficit that you're put into the moment you meet someone and they suspect you've got a self-interested motive behind what you're doing. And as a salesperson, when I'm interrupting your life and you think I'm trying to sell you something you don't need on a time frame that's uncomfortable at a price you can't afford, of course you mistrust my motives. And everyone knows salespeople make commissions. I say salespeople are not trusted because we smell. And by that, I mean we have commission breath.
Yes.
So is it unfair?
Another definition I'm stealing, by the way, is commission breath. Yes. Keep going.
I say, is it unfair that salespeople are not trusted out of the gate? Yes.
Yeah.
That's life. But the danger is, as a salesperson, assuming that trust takes time to build, because that's been my experience, and not noticing that what was actually happening is I was trying to climb out of a trust hole I didn't know I stepped into or was put into. And that does take months to years, if ever, But all the research in trust building says trustworthiness is a judgment people make about you in the milliseconds to minutes when they first meet you,
Yeah.
based on false signals. And they may not be accurate, but it happens. And so most of this trust that we need as salespeople and as leaders is so-called identity trust. It's that trust that I give you based on my answers to the question, who are you, character, and what do you want, motive? And I make those judgments really, really quickly. So can trust build over time? Of course it can. But is it also true that most trustworthiness is judged in the first 5 minutes? Absolutely.
Interesting. So you're this whole issue of trust, like I was almost putting it into a soft skills issue, and I did put it into a soft skill issue, and I'm okay with that. What I'm wondering though is how do we operationalize a soft skill issue? And I'm going to add one more thing to it before I ask you to respond, because it feels like this is a systemic issue. If the head of a company is go out there and do bad things, or go out there and make other people's lives better, right? Do you have to operationalize this at a company, or at least a sales department level?
I think if you don't, you're missing an enormous opportunity.
Yeah.
So a few things to say about that. The first is I speak to many chief revenue officers, and I ask them, in life in general, do you trust salespeople? And their response is generally no, because we all feel that way.
Yeah.
And then my question is, so what makes you think your customers or prospects trust your salespeople? They're no different. And so if you don't operationalize some kind of response to this reputational issue we have, then you're signing up for customers and prospects treating your salespeople like they treat every other salesperson, which is with suspicion, fear, and avoidance. So to your second point, I absolutely believe that being judged as trustworthy is a skill and not a trait.
Love that.
Is there such a thing as a trustworthy character? Absolutely. But that thing isn't what's being judged when you meet someone. They're judging you based on how you look and whether you smile and how you make small talk and how you introduce yourself and whether you remember their name, all of which are soft skills that can be learned, practiced, improved, polished, and perfected. And they don't yet have access to your true underlying character. So even if you tell the truth, you keep your promises, and you have good intentions, and you have amazing character, it'll be weeks or months before people get to see that character, by which stage they've long ago judged you on your first impression. And that judgment, if it's bad, will remove your opportunity to reveal your character. So people say, well, Andrew, this sounds manipulative. I have to design my first impression so that people judge me as trustworthy. And my response is absolutely, because the alternative is they'll judge you as an untrustworthy salesperson.
Yeah.
That's going to work for you.
Yeah. And doesn't the character get revealed in actions? So I agree with everything you just said, but then I got to prove it, right? And doesn't that come in, isn't that directly following this notion of first impressions?
Absolutely. I'm saying, a first impression is one thing. It earns you the right to make promises and to reveal your character over time. And I'm not for a second saying design a trustworthy first impression. Yeah. Meanwhile, you're actually someone without integrity. It's both and.
Yeah.
Start with integrity, but then design your first impression so that people judge you as trustworthy for long enough so that you get to prove that you really are worthy of trust. And you raised a point earlier. I think there is no point in a relationship that is a better opportunity to show your character than when things go wrong and trust is broken. How you behave in that moment, I often say, is the opportunity to double trustworthiness. Because just think about in your life. I mean, I have my oldest friend in the world. When we were kids, and I'm talking about 6 or 7, we were in this situation where there's a bunch of kids who were trying to bully us and beat us up. And he stood there side by side with me and me with him. 50 years later, I know that guy's got my back and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I trust people based on how they behave in the toughest of times. And in a business context, when your product fails, when someone doesn't do something or the tech goes down, that's the moment when you can reveal your character. And for what it's worth, I happen to think that leading with an apology is the worst thing you can do.
Interesting. I have to ask you to expound on that a bit.
Well, if I was late to this interview and I said, Brian, I'm so sorry I'm late. The traffic was terrible, blah, blah, blah. You being a polite human would say, Andrew, it's okay. But it's not okay.
Yeah.
And what I've apologized for is that I feel bad. But what you're really seeking is an apology for the impact on you.
Right.
And how would I know that unless I know what the impact is? And how would I know that unless I ask you? So in my view, the way to restore trust is to simply say what happened. Brian, I was late. No excuse. And then ask you, what's the impact on you?
Interesting.
And you might say, no big deal, Andrew. Or you could say, actually, you left me anxious, or you got me in trouble with Marie, my producer, because it wasn't on time. Whatever it is, when I understand the impact, I can then fix it.
Yes.
I can promise to fix it, or I can at least acknowledge that maybe I can't fix it. But on the basis of understanding your impact, my impact on you.
It's funny. It's funny that thing comes to mind, having raised stepchildren, boys who are now young men. That this thing I used to say to them, "You're not sorry. You're sorry you got caught." And so that's kind of it's what's coming to mind. So, all right. So, not really a mini role play here, but a really tough CRO. You talked about having conversations with CROs who have a massive weapon to their head to make the number. Yeah. How do you balance your team should be out there caring about helping that human make progress in their life with making the number?
Yeah, I don't have a great answer to this because I happen to think that quarter end quotas and pressures from sales leadership to discount to close a deal, give people a sign today or the price goes up tomorrow option doesn't serve the company, it doesn't serve the salesperson, and it certainly doesn't serve the long-term profitability of that account. So as a salesperson or to other salespeople, I would say, if you're going to have a career in this game for a long time, you're probably going to move companies. And the strongest asset you have is the 100 people to whom you sold in your last company, because you'll be revisiting them more than likely. And do you want to go back to them on the platform of broken trust? Or do you want to go back to them being the salesperson who said, I'm under enormous pressure to close this deal by this quarter. However, my commitment is to help you make progress in your life. And if that timing doesn't serve you, you're not going to get that pressure from me.
Yep. You just, in my mind, you just talked about brand equity, and you talked about personal brand equity and the brand equity of that rep. And I think about anyone who listens to the show knows I was fortunate enough to work near Bill Marriott for a while of Marriott Hotels. And he said to us one day, every decision you make is a deposit into or a withdrawal from brand equity. But when he said that, we were talking about the Marriott brand. And some decisions we were making with some franchisees. I just heard that as it relates to the brand of that rep for the rest of their career.
And I like that language of deposits because I do think trustworthiness is like a series of bank accounts. I have one with you, and every time I show up in a trustworthy manner, keep a promise, reveal my character, create a great first impression, you put some deposit in that account for me. And at some point, I get to spend it on a big ask, like, Brian, will you buy my product? Yes or no? If you trust me enough, you might say yes. And that's the other thing I really want salespeople to get clear about. Like, there is this rule in life which says, first humans decide whom to trust, and that determines what we believe. So, I mean, think about every fact you have in your head, probably 20 billion of them. From your belief in climate change to the capital of Egypt is Cairo. Almost every one of those we learned from a teacher, a magazine, a YouTube, TikTok. There are very, very few facts we get firsthand. So in every human's life, it's true. You decide whom to trust, and then you believe them. So as a salesperson, if you want to be believed about your product, your price, your value, all those other things, you just have one job, which is to be the most trustworthy person in every room.
Yeah. I as I said, I love it, and like I said, my different words were the power of kindness, but it's pretty damn similar, and I believed in it then, and I think there's a huge human benefit to doing this, like karma, whatever the hell you want to call it. It's just a great way to live your life. But I also, it's funny, I was just reading this, that when someone trusts someone, they feel that they can be more vulnerable, and in selling, that person you're across the desk from being more vulnerable shares more data with you.
Yeah. And gives you the inside scoop on how you're doing and champion you. And like there are countless advantages that come from someone actually trusting you. Or to flip it the other way around, if I don't trust you, I'm going to measure every word because I'm fearful you'll use it against me, you'll hold it against me. So you just get that thin layer, often even mistruth rather than just a thin layer.
Yeah.
Like when someone says, do you have a budget? No, of course I don't have a budget. Or I can't reveal it. That's just a subtext for I don't trust you.
One of my least favorite sales questions in the world, someone just asked me it the other day, and I said, no, I'm a startup. I do not have a budget. So, but I'll find it, if your thing's worth it, I'll find the money, somewhere. So yeah, just the other day. Now you teach, of course, at the master's level at Kellogg, but a lot of folks don't know that there's undergraduate programs now in sales. And I just did a podcast the other day with a gentleman who leads one of them. And I suggested to him that it would be great for his students to listen to Close Mode podcast, because they're going to hear from pros, and then have them write papers or do presentations on what the CRO or this head of enablement talked about. And man, this is one, if your goal is to build the most trustworthy profession on the planet, we've got to get this. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to reach out to a couple of deans I know and say, man, this is one, Andrew, really, I love everything you're saying. And I think it's one that needs to be in front of CROs, VPs of sales, as well as babies in undergraduate programs right now, to say, this, define sales this way, Mr. or Ms., and you're going to do much better.
Yeah.
Yep. This is cool. Yeah, you are super available with your time and generous with your ideas, and I love this conversation. And yeah, you have made something sort of soft, tractionable for me in my mind, and I think you make more money doing it this way too. By the way, I do agree with you.
Yeah, and I don't want to underestimate this idea that being trustworthy is a set of skills.
Yeah,
because just showing up indignant, you should trust me because I think I have good intentions, and I think I tell the truth, and I think I keep promises. Well, that's wonderful, but that doesn't address the skill gap in between who you think you are and how you make it easy for other people to trust you. That's all skill.
Yep. I agree. It's awesome. And I appreciate it. And I need to get this in front of those 19-year-olds as fast as we can, so I can help you with this quest to make us the most trustworthy profession in the planet. So yeah, I really do appreciate your time and your energy. This is a blast to do.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.